Your four favorites are 2001: A Space Odyssey, Hundreds of Beavers, Burnham, Inside, and The Beach Bum. My top choice for you is Idiocracy. It's a sci-fi film set in the future like 2001. It's a comedy that's full of visual gags like Hundreds of Beavers. Like Inside, it satirizes how our media consumption shapes society and explores concerns about the future of humanity and climate change. And while it's not technically a stoner comedy like The Beach Bum, a lot of the characters act like they're stoned. One of the first movies that popped into my head when I looked at your favorites was Logan's Run, because it's a sci-fi film set in the future like 2001, and there's an entire song in Inside about turning 30. And in this movie, turning 30 is a big deal because no one in this society is allowed to live past 30. And a lot of the characters live a hedonistic lifestyle like Moondog and The Beach Bum. Plus there's an element of action and chasing like in Hundreds of Beavers. Being John Malkovich is sci-fi like 2001. It's a surreal absurdist comedy like Hundreds of Beavers. It's self-reflexive and existential like Inside. And it's full of dysfunctional characters like The Beach Bum. Galaxy Quest is a sci-fi film involving space travel like 2001. It's got physical comedy and visual gags like Hundreds of Beavers. It's self-reflexive and satirical like Inside. And it's full of eccentric characters like The Beach Bum. Operation Avalanche involves space travel like 2001: A Space Odyssey and even references the production of that movie. It's funny like Hundreds of Beavers. It's such a unique singular film that involves the act of filmmaking itself like Inside. And there are some irreverent characters like in The Beach Bum. Since your favorites are mostly comedies, I want to recommend one of my favorites, The Jerk. It's got slapstick humor like Hundreds of Beavers. Like Inside, there are jokes about consumerism and people being performative. Like The Beach Bum, it follows an unconventional man on a series of misadventures. And like 2001, it explores some ideas about technological advancement. Plus there's a nod to 2001 with a pretty iconic needle drop. Top Secret is an action comedy with a lot of slapstick humor like Hundreds of Beavers. But there's also a musical component to it like Inside. And like The Beach Bum, the main character seems kind of unfazed by the chaos around him or that he causes. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure is sci-fi like 2001. It's got some absurd humor like Hundreds of Beavers. It involves music like Inside. And the main characters have a carefree attitude like Moondog and The Beach Bum. These next two aren't comedies, but the combination of the sci-fi space travel in 2001 and that isolated, lonely, existential crisis of Inside makes me think you might appreciate Moon and the Man Who Fell to Earth. Speaking of Earth, Earth Girls Are Easy is sci-fi like 2001, a comedy like Hundreds of Beavers, musical like Inside, and it's got some colorful characters like The Beach Bum. EdTV, like Inside, involves a person's private life being performed for an audience. Like 2001, it involves the relationship between humans and technology. Like The Beach Bum, it stars Matthew McConaughey, and it's a comedy like Hundreds of Beavers. Stranger Than Fiction is self-reflexive like Inside. Like Moondog and The Beach Bum, one of the characters is writing a book. And like Hundreds of Beavers, it's comedic and takes place in a world that feels constructed. I think David Holzman's Diary might be the closest thing to Inside because it also involves a man filming his daily activities. Your Letterboxd bio says you're a big fan of weird shit, so I'm also gonna throw in Holy Motors. It's visually ambitious like 2001. At times, it's surreal or absurd like Hundreds of Beavers. Like Inside, it's all about performance. And like The Beach Bum, it's got this bizarre freewheeling vibe. Repo Man is sci-fi and even includes a reference to 2001. Like Hundreds of Beavers, the main character ends up on a bizarre quest. Like Inside, it satirizes consumerism and other aspects of American society. And it also has that weird freewheeling energy like The Beach Bum. If you want another weird comedy that takes place in Florida like The Beach Bum, I think you might enjoy Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. Like Hundreds of Beavers, the world of this film feels absurd and artificial, and it's got some fun musical numbers like Inside. Never Going Back also came to mind because it's a stoner comedy like The Beach Bum, and the main characters are trying to go to the beach. The American Astronaut involves space travel like 2001. It's a black and white comedy like Hundreds of Beavers. It's got a musical component like Inside. And like The Beach Bum, the characters are unusual and the humor is a bit absurd. The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension is a sci-fi movie involving spacecrafts like 2001. It's an over-the-top absurd comedy like Hundreds of Beavers. And it's not a stoner comedy like The Beach Bum, but it might as well be because watching it will probably make you feel stoned because it's delightfully nonsensical.